Hello and welcome back to Garry's Garage. Last time I started putting Audi R8 coils onto my engine. This week I'm going to be finishing that off and also getting the gearbox back in one piece, ready to rear fix to the engine. So when I went to put the gearbox on, I noticed a bit of a problem, and that was that the cover that goes over the input shaft and that holds the release bearing, this one actually, this bit, this shaft that the release bearing slides up and down on, had snapped away. Now I've tried to weld it back together. I've only just bought a TIG welder, so not a pretty job, and I don't really trust it. So what I've done is gone to Nissan and got myself some goodies. I have a new paper gasket to replace the one in there, a new input shaft seal to stop the oil coming out, and a new cover. So let's get this unboxed and get it fitted to the gearbox. Okay, that slides much nicer down that than it does down my repaired one. Excellent, so I'll take the pivot ball off and move that over to there, and then get the oil seal pushed in and get it on the gearbox. So I was planning on finishing up the wiring here, but I've realised that I don't know the length that I need to run up to the fuel pressure sensor. So I'm going to leave that bit for the moment, and we'll get the gearbox on and then think about getting this back ready to go in the car. So that's gearbox on, exhaust on, starter motor, and anything else that's hanging off it that's stopping it from going back into the car. So now the gearbox and starter are all bolted into place. Next thing is put the exhaust back on, and then it's ready to go back in the car. Okay, so that's the exhaust back on. Just need to bolt up this water pipe here to in there and front of the engine. That one gets attached to the body once it's in, and then I think that is about ready to be slid into the car. Okay, that's that main bit of wiring loom sorted out. I've just got this one to route back in place and plug in. This has temperature sensors on it for inlet air temperature, post-turbo pre-charge cooler, and then post-charge cooler temperatures. That allows me to do lots of extra logging in the ECU. I do actually have enough spare pins in this one, removing the standard cable driven throttle body and the stepper motor that uses, and using electronic throttle instead has freed up a few wires in here. But right at this moment I can't really be bothered to undo this. I know this will be coming off again at a later date, so in order to not make too many changes all at once and just do incremental changes, I'm going to just route this one back in as it sits at the moment, and that will be a task for another time in the future. So let's get this routed back in roughly where it needs to go. Okay, that'll sit roughly there. I'll neaten it up a bit when everything else goes back on. Next thing I want to do is remove the fuel pressure regulator solenoid valve from this bracket here. That will free up the bracket for the boost solenoid and means that that will bolt on just a little bit nicer when the inlet manifold goes back on. Yes, I can bolt that on nicer when I've got the inlet manifold back in place. The next thing I think I'm going to do is hook back up the heater and the fuel to the engine and start getting it back towards a state where it will run again. So that's most of the rest of the wiring done on top of the engine. Next thing I'm going to do is put the inlet manifold back on and get the top of the engine back together. Okay, the next thing I want to reattach is the wastegate solenoid. That was sitting on the back of the inlet manifold here alongside the fuel pressure regulator solenoid, which I've now removed. So I'm going to take it off the little double bracket and fix it a bit nicer to the inlet manifold. That's as far as I'm going to go on the top for the moment. I am planning on getting a new radiator made up. The one that is on there at the moment is just a universal one, cheap job off eBay, and it's a bit tall, so I had to cut away the bottom of the fiberglass flip front. So the bottom of the radiator sticks out the front, which I don't really like, but it had to. I needed a radiator to get it back on the road. So I can't really put anything more back on the top until I've got my new radiator made and in place. So let's put the alternator back in, the front lower cross member, and put things back on underneath, which is going to be exhausts and prop shaft. yeah, that's the exhaust and prop back in place. Next thing I'm going to do is get back under the front and attach the positive battery terminal, which runs through the bulkhead, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, so we're under the front corner of the car now. So up here, coming through the passenger floor pan, is a insulated bolt, which is going to take the permanent 12 volt from the battery through to the starter motor and alternator. So that is this nice big red cable here, and that goes up here. So up here is a bolt that's insulated as it goes through the body. So I need this 12 volt permanent live cable. Route this nicely past the engine mount. Loop it around a bit. And that will sit there quite nicely. Just need to tighten that up now. That's all I've got time for this episode. I'm fairly happy that I've got most of the ancillaries back on and ready raring to go. Hopefully I can now think about getting my new radiator made up, and then that will get the cooling system back up and running. The front can go back on again. I can finish up the wiring, make some ECU tweaks. So let's see what happens next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.